warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Since you're here, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share the video as well so that more people get to know about Bharata First. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. If you like our content, please contribute to keep it alive. Let me also inform you about the massive discounts that we have at the Knowledge Center, and we will be closing registrations for the existing packages soon. This is your last chance to get these offerings right now. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com and register today. Don't miss out on this amazing learning experience. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of the video. Please go through it. And now on to the discussion. Amid concerns flagged by various state governments of shortage in supply of coal, which could lead to power crisis, the central government has stepped in. On Tuesday, P.K. Mishra, Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, held a meeting with the Coal Secretary Anil Kumar Jain, Power Secretary Alok Kumar, and Railway Board Chairman Suneet Sharma to discuss the issue. The plan focuses on ensuring uninterrupted fuel supplies to power plants. The state-run Coal India Ltd has been asked to supply an additional 200,000 tons of coal on a daily basis to ramp up the fossil fuel supplies to 2.1 million tons per day. The meeting came a day after the Union Home Minister held a similar exercise with coal and power ministers and asked them to maintain the supply of coal to thermal power plants. Delhi, Punjab, and Chhattisgarh are among the states which have repeatedly warned of a critical situation, urging the center to fulfill the coal requirements of power plants to avoid any disruption in service. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the shortage of coal. Joining me on the program today are Dr. Ajay Dua, former Commerce and Industry Secretary, Government of India, and Shubhamay Bhattacharjee, Consulting Editor of the Business Standard. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Mr. Dua, how would you look at this present crisis that several states are facing of coal shortage? Would you say that it's a shortage really of coal, or is it a supply side problem?
Frank, now that you right away got onto the ball, so to say, I think it's clearly a shortage of coal, resulting in shortage of power. It is not, and I'll look forward to views of Shubhamay, it is not a spike in demand of power. It is a spike compared to 2020 when the whole year was behind the year 2019. I say this because our plant load factor, plant load factor is a utilization factor of the thermal power stations. That's the terminology used. In the month of August, the plant load factor of our thermal stations, and thermal stations, as you know, the capacity is about 55% of the total 3.86 lakh megawatts. So it's about 2.02 lakh megawatts is thermal. Their plant load factor in August was 59%, and in September came down to 54. That means they were capable of producing more. Plant load, so had the demand spiked, then the plant load factor should have been higher. Certainly the demand is higher than 2020, there's no doubt about it, but I think we went somewhere wrong in our planning of coal requirements for the year. We knew in the month of June itself that a process of recovery has started. And with Coal India and Singareni coal mines together, Singareni coal mines partly owned by the government of Andhra Pradesh in southern India, the two together have not produced enough coal. And I would say a little bit of fault also of the planners who approved the Coal India plan. Right in the beginning of the year, the Coal India plan was put at less than the anticipated demand for coal. The coal demand for the current year was 740 million tons. But the planning was done and the target given to Coal India is 670 million tons. So where was the remaining 70 million tons to come from? The government thought, and Coal India probably had the government think along those lines, saying we are sitting on a stock of 99 million tons at our pit heads, at the mining heads. So this can be adequate. But such stock is an extremely old stock, unusable stock. And invariably, we have had problems. The last mile connectivity problem from coal mines to the railway stations has been a perennial one, and we did not attend to it well. And this year's rains, which spilled from August into September. August was fairly dry. So, in the month of September, the rains made it worse to access the coal which was being mined out. So, yesterday, the coal minister said we've got 400 lakh tons of coal lying at the mines. That means 40 million tons. So, out of 99 million tons, which was there at the beginning of the year, so 59 million tons of that coal has been used. Other 40 million tons means it is probably not usable, or it certainly couldn't be accessed. So all that I'm saying is that it was a case of, whether we like it or not, case of a bad planning. Rains are known for years, and our last mile connectivity issue is known. That demand was that there will be a recovery, it will get back to the normal scene, or should have been anticipated, because by June end, the second wave was over. We had these 3 or 4 months, yet we had. As a result, 4 days supply on an average at our out of the 135 thermal stations in the country. The pithead and the non-pithead, we have 135 stations. Shortage is being felt in most of them. Average stock, 4 days, when the regulator, the technical regulator, that's called the Central Electricity Authority, has prescribed 14 days. So even if you take what the coal minister says, that 40 million tons is there, at 1.9 million tons a day consumption, it comes to 22 days of coal being there, even if it's entirely usable, entirely accessible, it is 22 days. So there is a shortage of coal. In the past, let me just end at this initial comments. In the past, 25% of our coal requirement has been met through imports, roughly in the zone of 200 million tons. This year, the prices of coal, the global prices of raw coal, thermal coal, have gone up from $50 a ton to $200, essentially, I would say, entirely because of the Chinese demand. The Chinese recovery was sharper, they needed more coal, but ahead of the COP26 meeting at Glasgow later this month on the 31st, where China is going to be under great pressure to announce closing down of its plants earlier than what it is committed. Chinese are saying carbon neutral by 2060. Nobody in the world is going to accept that when they burn more coal than India, US, Indonesia combined. China. So they are going to be under pressure to reduce it. So they have shut a few plants of theirs. And also there have been heavy rains in the mining areas of China, and that's North China. So they can afford $200 a ton. We can't. Many of our coastal power stations, which are dependent upon imported coal, either blended with the local coal or by itself, they are running short. They are asking for more supplies. Some amount is being given. So it is a case of coal shortage and out coal shortage.
Absolutely. Points taken. Let me take the points that you're making forward with Shubhamoy now. So what is causing this shortage of coal? And would you agree with Mr. Dua that we failed really on anticipating the rise in demand and planning has been poor?
Frank, I agree. The data that Mr. Dua has given are all correct, except that I'll just say that we don't import 200 million tons, we import 250 million tons. Last year's was less at 219 million tons because of the COVID impact. By 2019-20, it has gone up to 250 million tons, which means that out of the 700 million tons of, compared to what the domestic production is last year, in 2019-20, this was something close to 30%. So we have a huge dependence on imported coal, and it's been rising over the years. So that's just one point. I agree with all the data points that Mr. Dua is making. I just want to say, are we saying that our power sector is run by the government of India? It's not. It is run largely by, other than NTPC, it is run by private power companies. The ones on the coasts or anyone otherwise. Why is it important? Because the crux of the problem, and this is not just this year's problem, it has been happening for the last 15 years. Coal India's production every year, and I'm here speaking as a person who tracks this every year, has been growing at a compounded annual growth rate of 3.06%. In the worst possible year of India's growth, India has never grown at less than 4%. So what does it mean? Coal production is always shorter than what the Indian economy needs. Now, what does it mean also is that no matter how much target you give Coal India is unable to fulfill it. It is not just this year, it fulfills no year. Coal India's target is always revised at the end of the year to reflect its actual production. So, setting Coal India a target doesn't do anything to raise production from Coal India. Mr. Ajay Dua would remember, and there was a presidential directive given in the year 2013 to Coal India. You have to raise production. And as the then chairman of Coal India, Mr. Narsingh Rao, had said, that if a man is running at 10 kilometers an hour, you can ask him to run at 12 kilometers per hour. You can ask him to run at 25 kilometers an hour. Essentially, Coal India is a hugely inefficient organization which needs to be split up and partially privatized and lots of things. No political party is interested in taking that call. We have delayed. What is the problem that has happened is we have delayed the reforms in the coal sector. It is not about setting targets. It is about the delay in reforming the coal sector by allowing more private companies to come in. Today, in 2013, we had 80% coal being generated by Coal India and Singareni. Today also the same level of coal is being generated by these two companies. Why? Because every state has opposed reforms in coal sector, opening up. In fact, as you know, Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh, they've all sent letters to the central government saying, don't allow commercial coal mining. Don't open up coal sector to more production. Having done that, all the parties are culpable. It's just a question of who's in chair on which day. They are now saying that this is a crisis. Why is this crisis happened? Because of a very simple reason. I started by saying Coal India is inefficient. And that's the point. This year, at the beginning of the year, calendar year, our economy was running at a very low pace. We were recovering from COVID. Indian economy was at a low pace. The power plants kept inventory, but the problem is that as they kept inventory, what is the inventory? That is coal. That is a cost for them, running up excess cost. The power sale wasn't happening. Mr. Dua is right that the power sales wasn't picking up at that time. Because it was not picking up, none of the plants wanted to run an excess inventory cost of 14 days, 25 days and all that. They kept on reducing because they knew Coal India was just a phone call away. You ring them, there's so much coal waiting on the wagons to be disposed of. As they reduced their coal offtake, Coal India, being an inefficient company, stopped producing coal to the extent that is necessary. How do we see that? If we look at the data for the past several months, Coal India's offtake, because Coal India's production level didn't rise. Allied to it, absolutely as Mr. Dua was saying, there's the monsoon issue. In monsoons, their production comes down. So here they were sitting on a stock. It wasn't being taken up. The offtake was low, and they stopped producing coal further. Stopped relatively of fresh coal supplies to take care that should there be a rise, am I prepared? Coal India is never prepared. Now, adding to the problem was something that all states do. What is it that they do? Most states in India have announced free power. When you announce free power, that means that you have to, who pays for that power? Either the state budget pays for it or the discoms pay for it. None of the states are able to do that. They are financially charged, obviously, because revenues have gone down due to several reasons. So what have they done? They have all fallen back on payment to the power companies, power generation companies. What has happened to the power generation companies? Their working capital has got reduced. So you can see here two things for the power companies. Their working capital has got reduced. Their inventory cost is rising. What will they do? They'll cut down on inventory cost, working capital. That is exactly what they did. No matter whatever central electricity authorities, it's not an order, by the way. It is a sort of a mandate that if you are so much far distance away from a coal mine, keep coal for 14 days. If you are a pithode plant, you can keep coal only for 3 days or 2 days. The further you are from the coal producing area, keep larger and larger stock.
Right.
But power companies didn't do it because they had a working capital challenge, and working capital challenge comes from the fact that they were not being paid. It's about 96,000 crore. So now you have a position that these companies now, when the demand recovery, even at a slow rate, it has happened. It's about 20% recovery in power going by the core sector data. April to August, there's been a 20% growth rate in power electricity produced, which roughly brings it slightly above 2019's production rate. So Mr. Dua is right about that. There's a crisis. They suddenly didn't have the coal. And they now, when they rang up Coal India didn't have the money. I mean, they didn't have the coal to send them. It is made worse by the fact that one guy who's keeping quiet in this entire problem is the railways. In 2014-15, there was a rationalization done of coal sent from mines to power plants. And it was said that the normative distance should not be more than 500 kilometers. Today's data, and I'm really quoting the latest data, monthly data of coal, which is called the average lead time, average lead traveled by a cargo. It has gone up to 571. That means coal is being traveling a longer distance to arrive at the power plant.
Sure.
So essentially everybody is goofing up, but it's the private sector, it is a public sector. And my point of departure from Mr. Dua is only about the fact that you can plan anything. But given the fact that the core of that plan is Coal India, which is a mighty inefficient company, you can plan anything. You can say that we are going, like Government of India say, we'll have 1 billion tons production in the year 2022. It will be shifted back to 2024. It can be shifted back even further, as I've written. You will not get coal. In that circumstance, commercial coal was the mining by private sector was the only way to go ahead. That had been delayed by the central government, and the state governments have allied to it by not paying for the power that they are selling. Punjab doesn't pay, Delhi doesn't pay, Tamil Nadu doesn't pay, Andhra Pradesh has said free. You name the state, they are going in for free power. So where will that money come from? And as a result, you have a first-class crisis in which everyone is pointing at another guy and saying, look, he's the cause for the trouble.
Points taken. Let me take those points forward with Mr. Dua now. Mr. Dua. So, Mr. Dua, let's take the points that Mr. Shubhai was making forward. Now, would you agree with his observations really as far as Coal India is concerned, and what are your thoughts on coal sector reforms?
I'm in full agreement with what Subhamoy said, that we have for too long increased our dependence on one source. And as we all know, a monopoly, whether it's a government monopoly or a private monopoly, it cannot be efficiently run. In the name of nationalization, way back in 1969, we've continued with it for 50 odd years, and we haven't shown, and I would call it political will to restructure Coal India, whether it is because of the vested interests, and the biggest vested interests there are the workers, who are, it is heavily overstaffed, and they just won't want to reform. The unions support them, and the unions in turn the political parties and the government consequently. It has happened. We need to break down Coal India. As long, you see, coal transition is fine, that we are moving from dirty fossil fuels to renewables or to whatever else comes out, hydrogen. based gas, green hydrogen or others. And it will take a time. It's time. From coal, the Prime Minister himself announced that from 5% we want gas-based power to be 15%. We want to be a gas economy. You can't afford the gas. You know the international prices of gas this year, like coal I mentioned, from $2 MMBTU 2 years ago, the price today is $40 MMBTU, 20 times increase even in demand for gas, natural gas, LNG, and the rest of the other gases. So the transition to cleaner fuels is going to take time. Yes, solar power, etc., all coming, but we are nowhere near the targets which we gave ourselves, 175 megawatts, gigawatts to be done by 2022. We are just about 100. Now we've stepped it up to 450 by 2030. I wish good luck, and it should happen because we need it. But till such time as that happens, our dependence on coal is going to continue. We've stopped, ever since we talked about renewable energies and other dependence on other energy forms of energy coming, we have put Coal India reforms on the back burner. Coal India, to start with, must be broken down, and a competition not from its own subsidiaries or broken units, but from the private sector, so-called commercial units, is required. We've opened up that to commercial, the Prime Minister announced these things, reforms last year, but there is a gestation time during which the private companies can go into operation. So Coal India gets that 4 years or 5 years is longish, because mining requires environmental clearances, investments and roads, etc. So the Coal India at least will face a threat. See, I'm putting it this way, Frank, that we might have said by 2060, our commitment to COP26 is India becomes carbon neutral by 2060. We might be compelled to make it 2050. The China, which said 2060, I think China will have to do it much earlier than us, irrespective of its dependence, because it's no longer a developing LDC or a per capita low income like us. So we must plan for how are we going to manage the next 30 years, from 2021 to 2050, and neglecting 54% of your installed capacity. That's the thermal-based park there, and the requirement of 1,000 million tons, that is a billion tons of coal, with 25%, as very rightly he mentioned, it was mentioned by Mr. Bhattacharya, that it has gone up from 20 to 25% the year before. Yes, 1 year it did. So it's about 1 billion tons of requirement. You got to plan for it. You got to plan realistically. You cannot start neglecting it, saying that transition, another arrangement is coming, hence we neglect it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shubhoy, just broadening the scope of the discussion and talking about the looming power shortage that we are going through right now, and considering that the economy is recovering, considering that a third wave is really not in the mix, at least for the moment and for the time being, do you see this power shortage having an impact on the larger economic recovery?
No, I'll tell you why. And that's a strong call that I'm making. Lots of people are making this huge brouhaha, and I was in several TV studios. Incidentally, Frank's yours is the best, where we really talk topics and we don't just simply, bandy charges. The problem is, it doesn't really matter whether a thermal plant has got 4 days stock or 15 days stock, as long as it has got the stock. The stock is supposed to be going into the plant for use. If it runs dry, then you can say that there's a problem. Mr. Dua made a major point about the PLF factor. If the PLF factor rises, then of course the coal generation would rise, and the very fact that the coal demand would rise per 1% rise in PLF factor runs to about 14 million tons of extra coal. So essentially it's about using the coal more efficiently, which the power plants have started doing. Our problem is that we have not kept provision for gas. Gas could have been a bridging capacity at this time. We don't use much gas, a little bit of gas import at this time. And if it had been planned earlier, and that is where the planning is weak, which I will absolutely say so, would have been very good in ensuring that there's no sudden hiccups. You know, the letter that Gale sent to Bhavana about the gas power plant. They're saying that they are going to stop it. Now, that is where we should have been a bit more cautious. The coal demand rising is, the coal demand and the electricity power demand rising is secular demand rising. And I suspect that given the current situation, the states, this is a very good time for states to actually learn the risks of what happens when they want to go the way of free power. So essentially, I am willing to agree, and that's why I'm saying that this is actually a very good time to bring in some amount of rationality into the coal discourse, which is what I'm hoping this one will do. It will not stop, again, as I said, looking at the current generation. I've been looking at the NTPL's daily load factor. It's been hovering between 170 and 190. Even at 170, 190, if it is being able to more or less keep on generating, to keep the power plants running, I don't expect there to be a sudden, power demand doesn't suddenly climb. In one day, it will not rise to 220. It'll rise gradually. Festival demand and everything taken together, it rises gradually. So essentially, since the crisis, the worst of the crisis was September, as Mr. Dua pointed out, when there was a flooding of the coal mines, that period is over. Coal India is now starting to bring more coal into the production process. And that would mean that the worst is behind us. You can still get some sudden shortage somewhere, but my sense is that the worst is really gone behind. It is now a question of long amount of political, charges between each other. That, of course, can't be stopped. But as I said, the power demand, however, will rise very substantially this year. And we shall be surprised. Why? Because two things are happening. The water supply, Peyajal supply project of Government of India is expanding. Peyajal to homes, Har Ghar Mein Jal, means essentially booster power to every places. That is going to be a big power electricity pusher. So this, by the end of this year, you will get some substantial addition to electricity demand. It will come gradually, along with the fact that cities are coming along everything. So taken together, I don't expect the power situation, to worsen. And if people get around to paying each other money, we'll have a much more happier outcome from this entire episode. That's it.
All right, time to get quick closing comments from both my panelists now with the best way forward, starting first with you, Mr. Dua.
Think ahead, not crisis fighting always. This time, I think we failed on that account. Long-term reforms, absolutely necessary. We have still a long time before we become coal-free in this country.
And Shubhamay, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
As I can see that the private sector accounts for about 36% of the total power demand in this country, the thermal coal. And since NTPC also now behaves like the private sector, it'll be nice if their dues are met, so which will ensure that the sector runs smooth. Remember, coal is our mainstay, but it is not the shortage of coal per se, it is the shortage of money being paid into the sector, which has brought us repeatedly into the crisis. This is not the first time. In the last decade, we have had 3 such spells. And that is something to be remembered when people rail against the Electricity Act reforms, which currently is on in terms of some of the agitation brought by the farmers. That Electricity Act reform actually addresses some of the challenges that we are facing now. It's necessary that it's allowed to go through rather than by short charging the necessary reform in this sector.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, what's coming out of this discussion is that the current crisis is not a supply side problem, but a shortage of coal. The planning has gone wrong. We should have been better prepared considering that the economic activity was getting back on track. The late monsoon, which lasted till September end, also made matters worse. Yes, we are now focusing on renewables, but our dependence on coal is going to continue at least till 2050. What we need is a forward-looking plan that looks at coal dependency over the next 30 years. Just like many other areas, coal sector reforms are the need of the hour. Coal India isn't performing the way it should, and it's time to break it down or break it up. Free power is only making matters worse. As far as the present crisis is concerned, the worst is over and things are going to improve from here, and there isn't going to be a major impact of this shortage that we will see on economic growth. Well, before I go, once again, let me remind you to like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share the video so that more people get to know about Bharata First. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. If you like the content, please contribute to keep it alive. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. Let me also inform you that we have massive discounts at the Knowledge Center, and we will be closing registrations for the existing packages soon. This is your last chance to get these offerings. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com and register now. Don't miss out on this amazing learning experience. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of the video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.